Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this Gaming Silicon video we're going to be discussing AMD's 2017 Financial Analyst Day. Now this might sound a bit of a dry subject for those who don't know, but it's actually very important. It reveals a lot of imperative information regarding Vega, the CPU that we've been hearing a lot about, also known as Threadripper, the 16-core 32-thread derivative for the HEDT market, and a lot more besides. So, just so we're all up front, the event is still currently ongoing. We are recording it so we can go through more information later. It's been going on for just about 2 hours and 30-ish minutes now. So, we already have a lot of information regarding Epyc, which is the CPU featuring 32 cores and 64 threads. This is for the data center. So, we have a lot of information, and quite frankly, it's very late here in the UK, so I'll cover this much more in depth tomorrow, but I do want to go through the too long didn't read, just to get everyone up to date who hasn't had chance to watch the conference. So I'm going to blast through the most important parts, and then, as I said, we'll have a proper catch-up where I can really dissect this tomorrow. So first things first, AMD have revealed Epyc. Yep, Epyc. EPYC. This is also known as Naples. It is a CPU which features 32 cores, 64 threads. The really emphasis for this processor isn't just, more cores, greater amounts of performance. Instead, we're looking at 45% more cores, 122% greater memory bandwidth, and 60% more I/O bandwidth, as opposed to their regular processors. This processor is essentially meant to be industry leading. So they're going to have 8 memory channels per Naples device, and in a 2-socket server, this is going to support 32 DIMMs of DDR4 on 16 memory channels. Obviously, it has the traditional highly optimized cache, which Ryzen naturally has. AMD's Infinity Fabric coherent interconnect for multiple Naples CPUs, and finally dedicated security hardware. We have discussed both Infinity Fabric as well as the dedicated security previously, so we'll go into that more perhaps in either a future video, or perhaps you can check out one of our older videos. As I said, today we're a bit time sensitive. This processor, according to AMD at least, is going to be built on the same 14nm FinFET process with Ryzen, and essentially it's going to be aiming at reducing power consumption while improving the performance. AMD have not really been very competitive when it comes to the data center. So the fact we have this confirmed in writing naturally means a couple of other things are also very much in writing as well. One of those is Threadripper. Now, most of this information is still being kind of on the down low. They are not revealing super amounts, although let's face it, there have been a lot of leaks, but it is nice to know that they've confirmed this. I guess at this point they didn't really have much choice since so much stuff had leaked anyway. But anyway, basically this is going to be the new Enthusiast CPU lineup, and it's going to be once again on a completely new platform, also known as X390, and this platform will feature up to 16 cores, 32 threads as a processor. Of course, there is no information regarding pricing, as you can imagine, but from what we can understand, the CPU will have a ridiculous amount of performance, thanks to quad-channel memory, and will essentially be built upon the same platform, the same socket, I guess, as the Epyc CPUs. The platform itself is known as Whitehaven, and really the focus is going to be on I/O. We don't know much, as I said, about the in-depth analysis and specifications. There are a lot of rumours, and we tackled those just yesterday. So for folks who do want to check that out, by all means you can look at the rumour stuff, but I want to keep this instead to official information from AMD in this particular video, as I feel that's fairer, because otherwise it starts to become like he said, she said, and I don't want any ambiguity between what's official and what's unofficial. But of course, the unofficial rumours do peg there is going to be a multitude of different processors from 10 to 16 cores, but so far all AMD have said is there's going to be 16 cores, 32 threads, and it's looking to be quite monstrous. I'm going to be very curious to see the pricing of this particular processor. Naturally, this is going to be focused and pitted up against the HEDT X299 platform from Intel, and its own Skylake X CPUs, as well as the Kaby Lake X CPUs as well. I'm guessing AMD here are hoping to simply go on a wider platform. In other words, they want to push more CPUs, perhaps not quite high as clock speed as Skylake, but they've got a greater number of CPU cores. So their strategy is simply go wider, go more parallel, and try and beat Intel in certain parts of the market. They've also reconfirmed something else that they had hinted on previously a couple of times, marked PAPERMASTER, that there are a couple of derivatives of Zen already in progress. Actually, to say derivatives is a bit of a disservice. The Zen 2 and also Zen 3, they're going to be built on a 7nm and a 7nm Plus process, and it's looking that they're going to trickle out over the next couple of years. As you would expect, these are going to be aiming upon a traditional increase in performance. They haven't touted the exact performance metric of what they're aiming for. It looks like it's going to be around the traditional IPC gains of like 5 to, let's say, 20-ish%, depending upon workload. But really, the most imperative thing here is that they're looking to leapfrog design teams. So what that basically means, you have 3 teams concurrently designing. One team, I guess, working on the base architecture, in which case Zen. Then you have another team working on Zen 2. While another one is taking the work that the first couple of teams have done and basically putting that together on Zen 3. So basically they're creating a 5-year roadmap here. Obviously, that means we're looking at leapfrogging design teams, focused on execution, in other words, actually getting the bloody product out the door, performance increases, and finally, performance per watt gains, which basically is exactly what you'd expect, simply increasing the performance based upon the same amount of energy going into the actual physical system. Whew, a lot of information's right, but there is a lot more to come. And this one specifically revolves around Vega. So Vega itself is a bit of a curious beast, because there is so much information popping around that, quite frankly, you can find it somewhat daunting. So, just so we're all clear about Vega, and I don't think I need to tell you this because, let's face it, it's pretty self-explanatory at this point, but it is, of course, an entire new GPU architecture from AMD. And they tackled Vega in a couple of different ways. The first is that they feel that they're improving the basics. They're basically going back to what they feel is the absolute basics of a GPU. The software that actually makes up the GPU, the drivers, for example, Crimson Relive for the regular desktop, and so on and so on. And they basically feel that they've done a significant job of optimizing games for when those actual pieces of hardware are available. Plus, as well, for when new games are available. So, in other words, when a new GPU is launched, they feel that the software is much better optimized for when that GPU architecture is readily available and launched. But also, let's say a new game comes out, for example, Prey or what have you, that game is much better optimized compared to what it would be even up to just a few years ago. So, there are a couple of very interesting things that AMD have discussed. The first is that they are pushing more towards AI, and we'll go more into that in just a moment, deep learning, because it's quite interesting what they're touting. In terms of datasets, they have said currently that GPUs are operating with training wheels. Raja KODURI likened it to you riding a bike when you were young and you're needing training wheels so you don't tip over. Well, he basically says that GPUs are currently on that stage. It's not the actual GPU performance which is the problem. Instead, he said it's actually the memory of the GPU itself which is the issue. Quite frankly, he said that, 16 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes, 32 gigabytes, it's nice, but it doesn't provide enough performance in professional markets, let alone for games. He said, at the moment, however, games are typically okay between 4 and 8 gigabytes, but obviously this is something that's going to change in the future. Now, he did release a couple of different sides regarding different performance metrics, but in Enthusiast Gaming, he did give a couple of different examples. The most imperative, and perhaps the most impressive, is Sniper Elite 3, the new Sniper Elite, running at 4K at over 60 frames per second. There wasn't that much information regarding system specifications, so we don't know the CPU, we don't know the DirectX version that was running. I'm going to make the assumption it was DirectX 12, but obviously I don't know that for certain. We don't know, for example, what the system configuration is in terms of drivers. There was none of that information. What we did know is it was running on a single Vega card and it was getting around 60 FPS. I would have preferred a couple of more games as well. I'm not saying the results are bogus, I'm just saying that I would prefer always to have more sources of data rather than fewer sources of data. But, and another thing they did demonstrate as well is perhaps everyone's favourite friend and buddy, the high bandwidth cache controller. So HBC, the idea behind this is it's much more efficient at utilising the storage on a graphics card. So in short, if you have a GPU that has, let's say, 4 GB of RAM, AMD is saying that it can be as efficient as, let's say, 8 or even 16 GB of RAM physical storage. Now, we have gone already in depth on how this works before, so I don't want to take up too much video space on how this actually works. Instead, I want to discuss a demo that they used. So this demo, just so we're all clear, AMD basically artificially, and I want to stress that, artificially limited the amount of RAM that was available on a game, Rise of the Tomb Raider, with a built-in benchmark, and basically they limited it to just 2 GB. One card with Vega was running with HBCC off, the second one was running with it on. So what was the difference? Well, essentially a large difference in minimum frames per second. We're looking at around 40 frames per second on a HBC off, whereas with HBC on, you're looking at almost about 46. Basically, minimum frames per second were the key here, but even maximum frames per second, as you can imagine, when you're not chugging with data on assets where, you know, it's constantly having to throw it over the PCIe bus, then you do have a slight increase in frames per second. It takes it from just under 60, once again, to about 70, which is not too bad, but really, the story here is not the average FPS, but really the actual minimum frames per second. In terms of professional market, AMD also really pushed on SSG. So for those who do not know, SSG is essentially an onboard, well, SSD, basically, an NVMe drive. They ran with a 2 TB NVMe drive and combined that with 16 GB HBM, 16 GB HBM2 memory, and well, the results were pretty startling. They gave a couple of different examples. The first was Adobe Premiere, or basically scrubbing through an Adobe Premiere timeline with 8K video. And the second was basically 3D rendering using ray tracing. And there is obviously a rather distinctive difference between the frame rate between the two. Now, I know you're going to say, what the hell is 8K going to be doing? Well, basically, when you're starting to do 8K, the datasets can become absolutely monstrous. In just a 20-ish minute TV show now, a lot of networks are going to start offering an 8K because obviously in the future 8K Blu-rays are going to become, or 8K TVs rather, are going to become more standard. So they don't want to basically start recording in lower quality. It's better to have much higher quality. And the problem, of course, with that is that, well, basically video becomes huge. We're not talking a 350 megabyte MP4 file anymore. Obviously, I'm slightly exaggerating here. We're talking, gigabytes upon terabytes upon data for just a season. So obviously, when you're scrubbing through this stuff to create montages, or God help you if you're actually making like a new Hollywood blockbuster, the datasets can become absolutely huge, and that's where SSG can perhaps become quite imperative. This is not going to be something you and I are going to be utilizing, however, for gaming. Okay, I know what you're going to say, but dude, who cares? What about Vega? Its performance. Now, this is the part that I really want to start to do some analysis on, and quite frankly, it's way too early to get any data yet. There was only one demo which pitted Vega against the NVIDIA P100. For those who don't know, that's of course the very high-end GPU, normally reserved for like deep learning and stuff. Basically, this is a deep bench. I'll say once more, deep bench. I don't want you to think I'm saying geek bench. Deep bench comparison. And basically, at the moment, in terms of deep learning, AMD are not on the map. They're just not. Therefore, they obviously want to do that because I don't think it requires me to tell you that that's going to be a very lucrative area of the market. The reason I'm discussing this is twofold. One, because AMD getting more money is good for us as consumers, because whether you're an NVIDIA supporter or whether you're an AMD supporter, AMD having more money means AMD can invest more in gaming and things that perhaps you care about. And even if you're an NVIDIA supporter, that's good, because that means if AMD have better products, that's going to push NVIDIA to release better products, which means you in turn, as an NVIDIA gamer, get better products, right? It's just a win-win, and perhaps also NVIDIA will be forced to lower their prices. The other reason it's quite interesting is it provides a bit of a benchmark. Now, I admit freely, this is a deep bench. It is not necessarily indicative of other real-world examples in gaming, but basically they ran a deep bench, and in terms of time to complete, it was 133 with the P100 versus Vega, which was 88. Couple of issues with that, it's comparing it against Pascal, and we all know that Volta is going to be shipping fairly soon from NVIDIA. However, that's not going to be client side, that's going to be, of course, for the high end. But that's where things get a bit tricky when we're talking about Vega and its launch date. So it looks like Vega is going to be launching this year. In June, rather, not this year, I'm sorry. And it's going to be known as Radeon Vega Frontier Edition. So before you start getting your wallets out, here's the tricky thing. And this might change from the rest of the financial analyst conference, and it might also change at Computex, or it might change, you know, from a different live stream in 2 days' time. We don't know. Obviously, you know, things can happen. But from what I'm reading, and I don't think Rajat KODURI is going to make another announcement, I'd imagine he would have done so during the gaming section. Basically, the Radeon Vega Frontier Edition is coming late June, but there is no information whatsoever upon the gaming variants, which are going to be, of course, RX Vega. So Radeon Vega Frontier Edition, once again, just so we're all on the same page, is the version which is going to be for deep learning or for professional markets. There is a demonstration image which popped up. I say demonstration image, basically a graph, which puts it about 1.5 times faster in terms of T-flops compared to the Radeon Fury X, 32, whereas half precision 16 was 25 T-flops, which is about 3 times faster. And finally, memory had 4 times the amount of memory, thanks to, of course, the inclusion of 16 gigabytes of HBM2. I'm kind of disappointed there's no information regarding the customer derivatives, but that doesn't necessarily mean much. It just might be they weren't ready to reveal it now. It might be they're ready to reveal it at Computex, or perhaps they just want to save some stuff back. So I'm not saying that customer derivatives aren't going to release yet. I'm simply saying that the customer derivatives were not announced in terms of release date yet. So the best thing I can say is that they may be coming. So I think that's just about it for this video, other than look at the card. And basically, AMD are really looking to, I guess, make a very unified front. They really want to push heterogeneous computing. They really want to push, you know, a variety of different products. Obviously, CPUs, GPUs, and everything you can possibly do. They keep talking about democratization. Basically, they believe in a very open environment when it comes to development. And I definitely noticed a couple of digs at NVIDIA. Specifically on, of course, the fact that, well, they don't have so much with the open. Although, to NVIDIA's credit, they are definitely opening things up in terms of development, and I really applaud NVIDIA for that. So, the main concern I have, of course, is Volta is coming for the high end in terms of, well, you know, deep learning. So that might be a bit of a problem for AMD. But then again, AMD might be able to make up for that somewhat because of the sheer I/O and the fact that obviously we're having the various AMD platforms, so how that's all going to play together, we just don't know until we see benchmarks. Also, Rajat KODURI was very honest and said that, to be honest, their software is just not optimized yet. They're still very early days. They're basically, essentially just learned how to make fire. Is maybe I'm slightly being a bit harsh, but basically that's where they're up to. It was also quite interesting because he said that they've only actually put together a very small number of engineers. Only about 20 of them in the company out of their 3,000 engineers have actually been working on deep learning. This is a paltry number, and I don't mean that in a negative way. That's a very paltry number compared to NVIDIA. NVIDIA, of course, deep learning is something that you can't really have an NVIDIA conference without talking about deep learning for at least half of it. So obviously AMD are starting to get into that. It's a very lucrative market. It can be used for everything from, I don't know, like Amazon, like predicting what products you're going to want, down to Facebook and figuring what news is going to be shown based upon your interests, down to, you know, predicting ocean currents and weather patterns and God knows what else. Deep learning is going to become increasingly pervasive in our lives, whether we like it or not. And so GPUs are going to increase in sales figures, if only for that alone. Anyway, there's a lot of other information we could certainly start talking about with this. But I think just for now, that's about all we have time for, because as I said, it's getting really late here in the UK. But I will have a lot more in-depth information tomorrow where we'll go through each product successively. But for now, take care of yourselves. Bye for now.